Story. Chapter 1. The Facade Crumbles. The Maldivian breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine across the pristine beach of the Amara Resort and Spa. Julian Thorne stood at the reception desk, his broad shoulders set in a rigid line as he listened to the apologetic receptionist explain that his name wasn't on the reservation list. He maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened imperceptibly. "I apologize, Mr. Thorne, but I can only see Mrs. Thorne's reservation," the young receptionist said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "And unfortunately, we're completely booked for the next 2 weeks." Behind him, his wife Serafina, Sarah to her followers, adjusted her designer sunglasses with manicured fingers. She stood with her 3 best friends, all of them decked out in matching Versace swimwear that probably cost more than the average person's monthly salary. "Oh, darling." Sarah's voice dripped with false concern. "I must have forgotten to add your name when I made the booking. I did everything so last minute. You know how these things happen." Julian turned slowly, his gaze falling on the 4 women. The silvery scar above his left eyebrow, a reminder of his past life, caught the tropical sunlight. He noticed the subtle exchange of glances between them, the barely concealed smirks. "These things don't just happen, Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an underlying steel that made the receptionist shrink back slightly. Melissa Giggles Harrison let out her trademark high-pitched laugh, the sound grating against Julian's ears. "Oh my God, Sarah, your husband is so serious all the time." "It's just a little mix-up." "Just a mix-up," echoed Patricia Glitz Montgomery, adjusting her diamond-encrusted watch. "Though really, Julian, did you honestly think you'd be staying at the Amara? This is a VIP resort, darling. For important people." The third friend, Rachel Gossip Chun, didn't even try to hide her disdain. "Why don't you just go back to designing your little buildings? Leave the luxury vacations to those who can appreciate them." Their laughter echoed across the marble-floored lobby, drawing curious glances from other guests. Julian stood perfectly still, his dark eyes taking in every detail of the scene before him. He saw how Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she brought her champagne glass to her lips, betraying her nervousness beneath her confident exterior. He noticed the way Glitz kept checking her phone, as if waiting for a message. He observed how Gossip's eyes darted toward the resort entrance every few seconds. They were waiting for someone. "Sarah," Julian said, his voice now devoid of any emotion, "when did you start planning this trip?" His wife's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Does it matter, darling? What matters is that there's been a terrible mistake and—" "3 months ago," he interrupted, "you started taking more calls in private. 2 months ago, your shopping habits changed. New lingerie, new perfume. 6 weeks ago, you changed your passwords. 3 weeks ago, you booked this trip." The smile froze on Sarah's face. Giggles stopped laughing. Glitz's hand tightened around her phone. "You've been planning this for months," Julian continued, each word measured and precise. "This isn't a mistake. This is deliberate." "Now listen here," Gossip started, but Julian cut her off with a look that made her step back. "I don't need to listen to anything more," he said. He turned back to the reception desk, picked up his passport, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. His luggage remained where he'd set it down. "Julian, wait," Sarah called out, a note of panic creeping into her voice. But Julian was already walking away, his steps measured and controlled. He passed through the lobby's ornate doors and disappeared into the lush tropical gardens surrounding the resort. Behind him, he heard Giggles resume her artificial laughter, though it sounded slightly strained now. "Oh my God, Sarah, did you see his face? He looked so shocked." "What a loser," Glitz added, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Sarah's voice floated after him, trying to maintain its mocking tone, but failing to hide a tremor of uncertainty. "Let him go. Rex will be here soon anyway." Julian's steps didn't falter at the mention of that name. He continued walking, each step taking him further from the facade of his marriage and closer to what he'd suspected for months. His grandmother had always told him that patience was a virtue, but she'd never mentioned that it could also be a weapon. In the distance, a hawk circled overhead, its keen eyes surveying the scene below. Julian watched it for a moment, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He pulled out his phone, ignored the notification showing 63 missed calls from Sarah over the past week, and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "It's time," he said when the line connected. She finally showed her hand. The voice on the other end was gruff but clear. "About damn time, kid. You remember what I taught you." Julian's fingers traced the scar above his eyebrow. "Strike once, strike hard. Leave nothing standing. Good boy. Where are you?" "The Maldives. Amara Resort." A low chuckle came through the phone. "Perfect. Islands are good. Nowhere to run. I'll make some calls." Julian ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. His wife and her friends thought they'd witnessed his humiliation. They thought they'd seen him break. They were wrong. They just witnessed the moment he stopped holding back. In the garden, a security camera pivoted to follow his movement. Julian noticed it, just as he noticed everything. He'd spent years playing the role of the quiet, successful architect, the patient husband who overlooked his wife's excessive spending and attention-seeking behavior. He'd built his reputation carefully, brick by brick, just as he'd built his buildings. But underneath that facade lay another man entirely. A man who'd fought his way up from nothing. A man who'd learned early that the world showed no mercy to the weak. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. "Patience, Julian. The cobra doesn't strike at the first sign of movement. It waits until the perfect moment." The perfect moment had arrived. Sarah and her friends had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They'd assumed he was weak. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Chapter 2. Seeds of Deception. The afternoon sun blazed across the resort's private beach as Sarah and her friends sprawled on designer loungers, their laughter carrying across the sand. Rex Montgomery stepped out of a sleek speedboat, his tailored linen shirt unbuttoned just enough to show off his tanned chest. He ran a hand through his artfully tousled hair, shooting a practiced smile at the group of women. "Ladies," he called out, striding toward them. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting too long." Sarah sat up, adjusting her bikini top with deliberate slowness. "Rex, darling, you're right on time." Glitz, Rex's sister, rolled her eyes behind her sunglasses. "You're always so dramatic with your entrances, little brother." "Can't help putting on a show, sis," Rex replied, his eyes never leaving Sarah, "especially when there's such an appreciative audience." Gossip leaned forward, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Speaking of shows, you should have seen Julian's face when he realized he wasn't on the guest list." "Priceless." "Oh my God, yes." Giggles chimed in, her laugh piercing the air. He just stood there, trying to look all dignified. Like, "Hello? You've been dumped, honey." Rex dropped onto the lounger beside Sarah, pulling her close. "I wish I'd been here to see it. Though I suppose watching security footage will have to do." "You should have seen him trying to maintain his composure," Sarah said, trailing her fingers along Rex's arm. "All these years of playing the perfect husband, and he couldn't even manage a scene. Just walked away like the nobody he is." Meanwhile, in a small village 20 minutes from the resort, Julian sat in a dimly lit room, facing an elderly woman whose dark eyes seemed to pierce right through him. Asha's cottage smelled of incense and herbs, its walls lined with books and curious artifacts. "You bring darkness with you," Asha said in accented English, studying the photograph Julian had placed on the table between them. It showed Sarah and Rex at a charity gala 3 months ago, their bodies turned toward each other despite standing apart. "I bring truth," Julian corrected, his voice steady. "And a request for assistance." Asha picked up the photo, her weathered fingers tracing the edges. "This woman, she has betrayed you. And this man." She tapped Rex's image. "He thinks himself clever, but he is a snake who has not yet learned to fear the mongoose." Julian reached into his jacket, withdrawing a thick folder. "I need access to certain channels. Discreet ones. I understand you have connections that might be useful." "Connections?" Asha's laugh was dry. "Young man, in these islands, information flows like the tides. One must simply know where to stand to catch what floats past." She opened the folder, her eyebrows rising slightly at its contents. "These are complex arrangements you've made." "I've had time to prepare," Julian said, pulling out his phone and showing her a series of offshore account numbers. Everything is in place. I just need the right people to help set things in motion. And what of your grandmother's wish? The one that kept you bound to this marriage? Julian's hand went to his scar, a habit he'd never quite broken. My grandmother wanted me to be happy, to have status through marriage. She never knew what Sarah really was. And now, he paused, his expression hardening. Now she's gone, and with her, any obligation I had to maintain this facade. Back at the resort, Rex was regaling the group with an impression of Julian's walking style, his movements exaggerated and stiff. Look at me. I'm Julian Thorne, famous architect. I design buildings because I can't design a personality. The women howled with laughter, Sarah clutching her sides. Stop, stop. You're killing me. Oh, wait. Here's Julian trying to be intimidating. Rex straightened his spine, lowering his voice to a growl. Sarah, you've been planning this for months. Like, duh. Did he think you actually loved him? Sarah wiped tears of mirth from her eyes. God, no. He was just so convenient. Rich enough to fund my lifestyle, boring enough to never question my stories about girls, trips, and fashion emergencies. She took a sip of champagne. Though I have to admit, he did have some moments where he seemed different. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, and it felt like he could see right through me. Please, Glitz scoffed. The man designs buildings for a living. He probably just had graph paper on his mind. In Asha's cottage, the old woman was making a series of phone calls, speaking rapidly in several different languages. Julian sat quietly, observing everything, memorizing names and details as they were mentioned. It is done, Asha finally said, setting down her ancient Nokia phone. The channels are open. But remember, young man, once you step onto this path, there is no turning back. Julian stood, straightening his jacket. The time for turning back ended the moment she made her choice. He placed an envelope on the table. Thank you for your help. Wait, Asha called as he reached the door. Your grandmother? She taught you patience, yes? But who taught you to fight? A small smile played at the corners of Julian's mouth. That's a story for another time. For now, let's just say I learned from the best. As Julian stepped out of the cottage, his phone buzzed. The number of missed calls from Sarah had reached 78. Each one was a testament to her growing unease, her realization that perhaps she'd miscalculated. She had no idea how right she was. Chapter 3. The Calm Before the Storm. The setting sun painted the local fishing village in shades of amber as Julian sat with Kieran, a weathered fisherman whose calloused hands spoke of decades at sea. They hunched over hand-drawn maps spread across a rough wooden table, the sound of waves providing a steady backdrop to their conversation. These currents, Kieran traced a gnarled finger along invisible lines between the islands. They change with the moon. What is safe passage today becomes treacherous tomorrow. Julian nodded, making notes in a small black notebook. And the resort supply routes? 3 main channels, Kieran replied, marking them with expert precision. The large boats use the deep water to the east. Small craft, like the one your wife's new man arrived in, they prefer the western approach. And security? Coast Guard patrols are predictable. Resort security, Kieran shrugged. They care only about what they can see from the beach. Julian's phone vibrated again. The missed calls from Sarah now numbered 82. He silenced it without looking at the screen. Meanwhile, at the resort, the atmosphere had shifted. Sarah paced her luxury suite, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. He's planning something, she muttered, checking her phone for the 100th time. Julian doesn't just disappear. He doesn't just walk away. Darling, you're being paranoid, Rex drawled from his position on the plush sofa. The man designs houses for a living. What's he going to do? Draw up some angry blueprints? Giggles snorted champagne through her nose at that, but her laughter sounded forced. Glitz shot her brother a warning look. You don't know him like I do, Sarah insisted. There were times, moments when I'd catch glimpses of something else beneath that quiet exterior. Something dangerous. Oh, please, Gossip interjected, though she'd moved closer to the window, scanning the darkening gardens. The man let you max out his credit cards without a word. He's probably crying in some budget hotel right now. A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. A resort staff member entered with an envelope. Mrs. Thorne? This was left for you at reception. Sarah snatched the envelope, tearing it open. Inside was a single photograph, her and Rex at the charity gala, the same one Julian had shown Asha. Across it, in Julian's precise architect's handwriting, "I've known for months." "Shit," Rex muttered, his confident facade cracking slightly. "How did he?" "It doesn't matter," Sarah snapped, but her hands shook as she crumpled the photo. "He's just trying to scare us. Julian doesn't have it in him to do anything else." In a secluded cove, far from the resort's manicured beaches, Julian sat alone on the sand. His laptop glowed in the gathering darkness as he made the final preparations. On the screen, a complex web of financial transactions awaited his authorization. Years of careful planning, of maintaining his cover as nothing more than a successful architect, had led to this moment. His phone lit up with another call from Sarah. 83 now. He let it ring. A memory surfaced. His grandmother on her deathbed, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll find happiness, Julian. Promise me you'll settle down, make a good life." He had promised. And for years, he'd kept that promise, suppressing his true nature, playing the role of the patient, understanding husband. Even as he'd watched Sarah's mask slip, noticed the signs of her infidelity, he'd maintained his facade. But his grandmother was gone now, and with her, the last restraint that had held him back. His laptop chimed with an incoming email. Contact details for his old network, preserved from his days before architecture, when he'd learned lessons far more valuable than design principles. Names, numbers, favors waiting to be called in. Julian began to type, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Each message was carefully crafted, each recipient chosen with purpose. The pieces were falling into place. In her suite, Sarah's phone chimed with a text message. "Unknown number. The cobra doesn't strike at the first sign of movement. It waits for the perfect moment." She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. "What is it?" Rex demanded, but Sarah couldn't find the words to explain the ice that had just settled in her veins. The message reminded her of something Julian had once said years ago when she'd asked about his scar. He'd smiled that quiet smile of his and said his grandmother had taught him the value of patience. She hadn't understood then. She was beginning to understand now. As the night deepened, Julian closed his laptop and stood, brushing sand from his clothes. Everything was in place. Tomorrow, the first phase would begin. Sarah, Rex, and their accomplices thought they'd witnessed his humiliation. They thought they'd seen him break. What they'd actually seen was the moment he stopped holding back. The moment the architect's facade cracked, revealing the fighter beneath. His grandmother had wanted him to find happiness. Instead, he'd found purpose. The cobra was done waiting. It was time to strike. Chapter 4. The Financial Quake. Sarah's phone buzzed at 7 a.m., displaying her private banker's number. She stretched lazily in her resort suite, still basking in the satisfaction of yesterday's triumph over Julian. "Charles, darling, isn't it a bit early for—" "Mrs. Thorne," Charles's voice cracked with tension. "There's been a situation with your accounts." Sarah sat up, her manicured hand clutching the Egyptian cotton sheets. "What kind of situation?" "They're frozen. All of them. Even your trust fund." "What?" She jumped out of bed, nearly knocking over her champagne glass from last night. "That's impossible. Unfreeze them." "I can't. The orders came from multiple regulatory bodies. There are allegations." "Allegations?" Sarah's voice rose. "Of what?" "Money laundering, tax evasion, securities fraud." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "Just fix it." "Mrs. Thorne, these orders are beyond my authority. They're citing evidence dating back years." Sarah ended the call, her hands shaking as she tried to access her banking apps. Each attempt met with the same message. Account access restricted pending investigation. A knock at her door made her jump. Rex burst in, his usual smooth demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "My properties," he gasped. "All my development projects, they're being audited. The investors are pulling out." The banks are calling in loans. What? How? Someone's been feeding information to the SEC, years of private records, offshore accounts, everything. Rex ran his hands through his disheveled hair. It's him. It has to be. Julian? Sarah laughed, but the sound held an edge of hysteria. He's an architect. He doesn't have this kind of power. Then explain this. Rex thrust his phone at her. On the screen, his company's stock price showed a straight line downward. Someone's been shorting our stocks, exposing our dealings to regulatory bodies. My entire empire is collapsing. In a sleek office building across the island, Julian sat across from a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, her tailored suit a stark contrast to his casual resort wear. The dominoes are falling exactly as you predicted, Cora Matthews said, sliding a tablet across the desk. Sarah's accounts are locked, Rex's empire is crumbling, and the evidence trail leads everywhere except back to you. Julian studied the financial reports on the screen. And the offshore accounts? Traced back to their own shell companies. Cora's lips curved into a predatory smile. I must admit, when you hired me, I thought this was just another divorce case. But this. She gestured at the mounting evidence of Rex and Sarah's financial misdeeds. This is art. You sound impressed. I am. 5 years ago, my husband pulled something similar to what Rex did to you. Cora's eyes hardened. He walked away clean while I rebuilt my life from scratch. Watching you dismantle their world piece by piece. It's satisfying. Julian set down the tablet. This is just the beginning. Back at the resort, Sarah paced her suite while Rex argued with his lawyers on the phone. Glitz burst in without knocking. What the hell did you do? She demanded, waving her phone at her brother. My foundation's accounts are frozen because of their connection to your companies. I didn't do anything. Rex shouted. This is all him. That quiet, pathetic architect you thought was such an easy mark. Easy mark. Glitz laughed bitterly. Look around you. He's destroying us all. And you're telling me he's just an architect? Sarah sank onto the couch, her designer dress crumpling. There were moments, things I noticed but ignored. The way he'd watch us sometimes, like he was cataloging everything. How he always seemed to know about business dealings he shouldn't have understood. God, what have we done? What we've done, Rex snarled, is underestimate him. And now we're paying for it. In his temporary office, Julian received another update from his financial team. The complex web of transactions he'd spent years preparing was executing flawlessly. Each move triggered another, exposing fraudulent dealings, questionable partnerships, tax evasion schemes. His phone buzzed with a message from Cora. Rex just tried to access his emergency funds in the Caymans. Julian typed back. Let him. Moments later, his phone lit up with Rex's panicked voice message. You think you can do this to me? I built this empire. I own half of a pause, then. Oh God. The accounts, they're empty. How did you? What are you? Julian deleted the message without replying. On his laptop, he pulled up a video feed showing Sarah's suite at the resort. She sat amid scattered financial documents, her composed facade cracking as she tried desperately to find some account, some resource that wasn't compromised. Sir, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Matthews is here with the next phase of documents. Send her in. Cora entered, carrying a thick folder. The media packets are ready. Shall we begin the next phase? Julian nodded, turning back to the video feed. He watched as Sarah broke down, screaming at Rex, who was himself shouting into his phone at yet another deserting investor. They had thought him weak, thought him nothing more than the quiet architect they could discard at will. Now they would learn what he really was, a predator who had been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And this was just the beginning. Chapter 5. The Serpent's Unveiling. The headlines splashed across social media like wildfire. Lifestyle influencers' perfect life exposed as fraud. Accompanying photos showed Sarah and Rex in intimate moments, their affair laid bare for millions to see. More damaging were the screenshots of Sarah's private messages mocking her followers, revealing the cynical manipulation behind her carefully curated image. Make it stop, Sarah screamed, hurling her phone across the resort suite. It hit the wall just as another notification chimed on her laptop. Another expose. Another piece of her life ripped apart and displayed for public consumption. Rex stormed in, his face ashen. Have you seen the business papers? They're calling me a fraud. A Ponzi scheme operator. He grabbed a bottle of scotch, not bothering with a glass. They have documents going back years. Internal emails, bank transfers, everything. How? Sarah grabbed her tablet, scrolling through the endless stream of revelations. These photos. There were no photographers around. I would have noticed. Local tourists, Glitz said from the doorway, her own phone clutched in her manicured hand. All paid in cash. They've been watching us since we arrived. She laughed bitterly. God, we were so busy laughing at him. We never noticed we were the ones being played. On the other side of the island, Julian sat in Asha's dimly lit cottage, watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. The old woman moved quietly behind him, brewing tea in ancient copper pots. The media vultures circle, she observed, setting a cup beside him. You have given them quite a feast. They're doing exactly what I knew they would. Julian's eyes tracked the trending topics, watching his wife's carefully built influencer empire crumble in real time. Humans love to tear down what they once worshipped. And the evidence? All authentic. That's what makes it so devastating. He pulled up another screen showing Rex's company stock in free fall. They can't claim manipulation or forgery. Everything is real. Their mockery, their cruelty, their fraud. I just made sure the right people saw it. Back at the resort, Gossip stared at her phone in horror as her own social media following plummeted. Comments poured in, condemning her association with Sarah, digging up old posts where she participated in mocking followers and spreading malicious rumors. I have to distance myself, she muttered, fingers flying over her keyboard as she tried to delete years of incriminating posts. I can't let her drag me down too. It's too late, Glitz snapped, watching her own carefully cultivated society image dissolve. He's not just exposing them. He's exposing all of us. Everything we've done, everyone we've stepped on to get here. Giggles burst into the room, her trademark laugh nowhere to be heard. The charity foundation, they're saying we embezzled funds, used donations for personal expenses. Because you did, Rex snarled, pacing the room like a caged animal. We all did. And somehow he knew. He knew everything. Sarah sat amid the wreckage of her life, watching her follower count drop by thousands each hour. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages, not from supporters, but from sponsors rapidly severing ties, from journalists seeking comments, from angry followers demanding explanations. I've tried calling my family, she whispered. They won't answer. My own mother sent a text saying she's disappointed in the person I've become. She looked up at her friends, makeup streaking down her face. How did we not see this coming? How did we not know what he was capable of? In his temporary command center, Julian reviewed the next batch of revelations with Cora. The lawyer's eyes gleamed as she assembled more evidence packets for release. The timing is perfect, she said, organizing documents. Each revelation builds on the last, leaving no room for them to recover or rebuild their narrative. Public opinion? Completely turned. Your wife's cruelty, Rex's fraud, their friend's complicity. It's the perfect storm of influencer corruption and financial crime. People are furious at being deceived. Julian's phone buzzed with a notification. He pulled up a video feed showing Sarah attempting to leave the resort, only to be confronted by a wall of reporters. Their questions pierced the air like arrows. Mrs. Thorne, did you really fake your charity work? Mr. Montgomery, what do you say to investors who've lost everything? Is it true your entire relationship was a lie? Through the cameras, Julian watched his wife crumble under the assault. Her designer dress and perfect makeup now a parody of the image she'd worked so hard to maintain. Rex tried to shield her from the cameras, but his own facade was cracking, the smooth businessman replaced by a desperate, cornered fraud. Sir, his assistant interrupted. Ms. Matthews says it's time for the next phase. Julian nodded, turning back to his screens. In one window, Gossip frantically tried to salvage her reputation, posting apologies that only drew more scorn. In another, Glitz argued with her charitable foundation's board of directors, watching her social status evaporate. And in a third, Giggles sat alone in her room, her phone dark and silent, no one left to laugh with. They had mocked him, humiliated him, thought him weak. Now they were learning the truth, that beneath the quiet architect's exterior lay a man who had spent years preparing for this moment, a predator who had studied his prey's every weakness. And he was far from finished. Chapter 6. The Web Titans. Rex slammed his fist into the resort room wall, barely registering the pain as plaster cracked. I want him dead. Do you understand me? Dead. The men before him, local muscle hired through increasingly desperate connections, shifted uncomfortably. Their leader, a scarred man named Victor, cleared his throat. Mr. Montgomery, given your current financial situation, Rex yanked off his Rolex. Take it. Worth 50,000. Find him, hurt him, kill him. I don't care. Just make him stop. In his private villa on the other side of the island, Julian watched the exchange through hidden cameras, his expression unchanged as he listened to Rex order his death. A soft knock at the door preceded Viper's entrance, a lean, weathered man whose movements spoke of practiced violence. Your wife's new friend is getting desperate, Viper observed, dropping into a chair. Sending amateurs to do a professional's job. Victor's crew, Julian replied, pulling up their files. Small-time enforcers usually handle tourist scams and petty protection rackets. Want me to handle it? No. I'll deal with them myself. Julian stood, rolling his shoulders. It's time they learned who they're really dealing with. Viper's eyes gleamed. The architect's ready to get his hands dirty again? The architect never existed. He was just a cover, like the quiet husband, the patient man who looked the other way. Julian's scar caught the light as he moved. You taught me better than that. That I did, kid. That scar above your eye? Your first lesson in never underestimating an opponent. And my last lesson in being unprepared. Meanwhile, Sarah paced her suite, her phone open to Julian's contact. 67 deleted messages mocked her from the screen. Please, she whispered, recording another voice message. Julian, we can talk about this. It was all a misunderstanding. I never meant to. The message sent into silence. Outside her window, reporters still camped in the resort gardens, cameras ready. A commotion in the hallway drew her attention. Glitz burst in, her designer dress torn, mascara streaking her face. They're charging Rex, she gasped. Real charges, fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. They're saying 10 years minimum. What? No, that's impossible. Julian's just trying to scare us. Wake up. Glitz grabbed her shoulders. Your husband isn't who we thought he was. The quiet architect? It was an act. All of it. In the villa's private gym, Julian moved through combat forms with fluid grace, each strike precise and measured. Viper watched from the doorway, critiquing his technique. Your skills haven't rusted, the older man observed. You've been practicing 3 hours every morning before the office. Maintaining the architect's facade didn't mean losing my edge. An alert blinked on Julian's phone. Victor's crew was on the move, having tracked him to a beachfront cafe he frequented. Shall we give them a proper welcome? Viper asked. Julian's lips curved slightly. Let's remind them why I survived the circuit. The confrontation, when it came, was brief and brutal. Victor's men found Julian alone on a secluded beach path. Their confidence lasted exactly 12 seconds, the time it took Julian to disable the first 3 attackers. Victor himself lasted longer, managing to graze Julian's cheek before finding himself on his knees, arm twisted at an impossible angle. Mr. Montgomery sent us, he gasped. Paid us to. I know what he paid you for. Julian's voice was conversational, even as he applied more pressure. Now you'll deliver a message back. Tell him I'm not the man he thought I was. Tell him what you saw here. What are you? Something he should have feared from the beginning. Back at the resort, Rex's phone chimed with a message. The video showed his hired muscle being systematically taken apart by the man he'd dismissed as a soft architect. He watched, face draining of color, as Julian moved with the lethal grace of a trained fighter. Oh God, he whispered. What have I done? Sarah, attempting to track Julian down herself, caught glimpses of him through the resort's security cameras. Each time she got close, he seemed to vanish, always one step ahead. Her desperation grew with each failed attempt. In the villa, Julian reviewed footage of Sarah's increasingly frantic searches. Viper cleaned his knuckles with antiseptic, though most of the blood wasn't his. She's unraveling, Viper noted. They all are. Good. Julian pulled up more surveillance feeds. Let them feel what it's like to be powerless. To have everything they thought they controlled slip through their fingers. The wreck situation? He'll try again. His type always does. But first, Julian opened his laptop, revealing more documents ready for release. Let's see how he handles the next wave of revelations. The web was tightening. Each struggle only entangled them further. Each attempt to fight back played directly into his hands. They were learning, finally, that the quiet architect they'd mocked had been hiding something far more dangerous. And he was just getting started. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Room 412 of the Palm Grove and bore no resemblance to Sarah's luxurious resort suite. Paint peeled from the walls, the air conditioner rattled, and the bedspread bore mysterious stains. Sarah sat on the sagging mattress, staring at her phone's black screen. No notifications. No messages. No calls. She pressed the power button again, watching it light up with her last message to Julian. Please, we need to talk. I can explain everything. The silence that followed echoed louder than any response could. A cockroach scuttled across the floor, making her jump. She'd been reduced to this, hiding in a budget hotel on the outskirts of town, her designer clothes traded for off-the-rack basics, her credit cards useless plastic. The TV droned in the background. Another news report about her downfall. Former influencer Serafina Thorne faces multiple allegations of fraud and tax evasion. Sources close to the investigation suggest the evidence against her is substantial. She hurled the remote at the screen, missing by inches. The newsreader continued relentlessly. Meanwhile, her lover Rex Montgomery remains in custody as investigators uncover more details about their financial schemes. A knock at the door made her freeze. Who is it? Room service, a bored voice replied. Sarah yanked open the door to find a young woman with a cleaning cart. The girl's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with contempt. Oh my God, you're her. That fake influencer. The one who... The girl pulled out her phone. Sarah slammed the door shut, heart pounding. They were everywhere, watching, judging, documenting her fall. She slid down against the door, burying her face in her hands. Across town, in his command center, Julian reviewed the latest reports from Cora. The prosecution has everything they need, the lawyer said, spreading documents across his desk. Bank records, correspondence, witness statements, it's airtight. Both criminal and civil cases. And Rex? Singing like a bird to save himself. He's implicated Sarah in everything, trying to paint himself as a victim of her manipulation. Cora's lips curved. It won't help him, but it's destroying what's left of their relationship. Julian nodded, pulling up surveillance footage of Sarah's hotel. Her family, still refusing contact. Her mother's statement to the press was particularly damning. Called her a disgrace to the family name and suggested she seek professional help. On another screen, social media feeds scrolled past. Sarah's former followers dissected her fall with savage glee, sharing old posts with new context, exposing years of lies and manipulation. Mr. Thorne. Viper entered, tablet in hand. You should see this. The screen showed Sarah attempting to visit her old shopping haunts, only to be turned away. Designer boutiques that once welcomed her now locked their doors. Restaurants that had comped her meals now refused reservations. She tried accessing her backup accounts, Cora added. The ones she thought were hidden. I found those months ago, Julian replied. Along with the offshore transfers, the shell companies, the fake charity donations. She's running out of options, Viper observed. People like her, they're not built for isolation. In her hotel room, Sarah paced like a caged animal. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rex's lawyer. Client has provided additional testimony. Advise immediate cooperation with authorities. That bastard, she hissed. After everything, she dialed her mother's number again. Straight to voicemail. Her father's phone, blocked. Her sister's Instagram showed a new post. Sometimes toxic people wear designer labels. Hashtag no contact, hashtag boundary. The isolation crushed in on her. No friends, no family, no followers. Her carefully constructed world had been dismantled piece by piece, leaving her alone with the reality of who she truly was. A notification popped up. Someone had tagged her in a video. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. There she was, at the resort check-in, laughing as Julian walked away. The comments were brutal. Look at her smirking while destroying her husband's life. Karma is beautiful. She deserves everything happening to her. In his office, Julian watched Sarah's deterioration through multiple feeds. Her expensive makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. Her designer clothes couldn't mask her desperation. "Sir," his assistant interrupted. "The final evidence package is ready." Julian took the file, reviewing its contents. Bank statements, text messages, emails. A complete record of Sarah's betrayals, not just of him, but of everyone who had trusted her. "Send it to the prosecutors," he instructed. "All of it." Cora raised an eyebrow. "That's far more than they need for a conviction. This isn't just about legal punishment." Julian's voice was cold. "It's about making sure she understands exactly what she is, what she's done, and why she deserves everything that's happening to her." In her hotel room, Sarah's phone buzzed with another notification. A video compilation. Her mocking posts about authentic living juxtaposed with evidence of her lies. Her charity work exposed as tax fraud. Her perfect marriage revealed as a sham. She hurled the phone across the room, but the truth followed her. Each notification, each news report, each rejected call stripped away another layer of her facade until nothing remained but the hollow shell beneath. The woman who had once commanded attention now couldn't bear to be seen. The influencer who had built her life on appearances now hid from mirrors. The social butterfly who had thrived on connection now flinched at human contact. Julian's revenge wasn't just the destruction of her wealth or status. It was forcing her to see herself through the eyes of those she deceived. Each revelation was a crack in her self-image. Each exposed lay another blow to her carefully constructed identity. She was learning, finally, what true isolation felt like. What it meant to be powerless, to be the object of contempt rather than admiration. And Julian, watching through his network of surveillance, felt no satisfaction in her pain. This wasn't about pleasure. It was about justice, cold and absolute. The serpent strike had been deadly precise, and the venom was only beginning to take effect. Chapter 8. The Final Judgment. Rex Montgomery's bail hearing should have been routine. Instead, it became the stage for his final confrontation with Julian. The courthouse corridor stretched before him as he was led out in handcuffs. His designer suit, once immaculate, hung loose on his frame after weeks in custody. His eyes darted nervously, searching for threats in shadows. Julian stepped out from an alcove, his presence freezing Rex in place. The guards, subtly paid to look the other way, moved back. "You." Rex's voice cracked. "You've destroyed everything."
No.
Julian's voice was soft, but it carried weight. "You did that yourself. I just exposed what was already there." Rex lunged forward, handcuffs rattling. "I'll kill you." Julian didn't flinch. His movement was fluid, practiced, a single step forward, a precise strike. Rex crumpled, gasping. 5 points of contact, Julian explained calmly, as Rex struggled to breathe. "Pressure points I learned in the circuit. The pain will fade in an hour. The lesson, hopefully, will last longer." What are you?" "What I've always been. You just never bothered to look past the surface." Julian straightened his jacket. "That was your mistake. You saw the architect, the quiet husband, and thought you saw weakness. The guards are giving us privacy. Unlike you, I understand the value of loyal allies." Julian crouched beside Rex. "Everything you built was a lie. Your success, your reputation, your relationships, all built on fraud and manipulation. I just helped it collapse under its own weight." Footsteps approached. Viper emerged from the shadows, his presence a silent threat. "The car's ready," he told Julian. "Sarah's being brought in for questioning now." In the police station's interview room, Sarah faced her own reckoning. Detective Chin spread photographs across the table, evidence of years of financial fraud, tax evasion, charity scams. Mrs. Thorne, Chin's voice was professional but cold. Let's discuss the Carlton Foundation donations. I want my lawyer, Sarah whispered. Your fourth one? They keep quitting. Something about the overwhelming evidence against you. The door opened. Julian entered, followed by Cora. Sarah's breath caught. Julian, please. He ignored her, addressing Chun. Detective, Ms. Matthews has additional documentation you'll want to see. Cora opened her briefcase, extracting files. Bank records showing systematic fraud dating back 5 years. Emails discussing tax evasion schemes. And text messages coordinating witness intimidation. Sarah's hands shook. Those were private. Privacy is a privilege, Julian said, finally looking at her. Like trust. Like loyalty. You sacrificed those privileges when you chose deception over truth. I never meant to get caught. Julian's voice remained level. To face consequences? To lose everything you stole and lied for? He placed another file on the table. Your grandmother's inheritance. The money you embezzled from her estate while I watched, waiting, gathering evidence. She wanted me to find happiness. Instead, I found truth. Sarah's facade cracked. Tears streaked her makeup. Julian, we can still. No. His tone could have frozen fire. We can't. You chose your path. Now you'll walk it to the end. Detective Chun cleared his throat. Mrs. Thorne, based on this evidence, we're charging you with multiple felony counts. The words washed over her as she stared at Julian, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the quiet architect she'd dismissed, but a predator who had patiently waited to strike. Later, in the courthouse, Julian watched as both Sarah and Rex faced arraignment. Their lawyers looked defeated, crushed under the weight of evidence. Glitz sat in the gallery, her own legal troubles evident in her subdued appearance. Gossip was notably absent, having fled the country ahead of her own indictment. Giggle sat alone, served with papers for her role in the charity fraud. The judge's voice rang out. Based on the overwhelming evidence and the serious nature of these crimes, bail is denied for both defendants. As they were led away, Sarah looked back one last time. Julian met her gaze with cold indifference. She saw no anger, no hatred, just the absolute certainty of justice being served. The woman who had once mocked him now shuffled in prison clothes. The man who had tried to steal his life now faced years behind bars. Their empires, built on lies, had crumbled to dust. And Julian, the architect they had underestimated, stood amid the ruins, his revenge complete. Chapter 9. The Serpent's Flight. 1 year later, Julian stood on his private beach, the same ocean before him, but everything else transformed. His architectural firm had expanded, now specializing in sustainable community development. His reputation had grown not from social media manipulation, but from genuine achievement. His phone buzzed, a news alert. Socialite Serafina Thorne sentenced to 12 years for fraud and tax evasion. Another. Real estate mogul Rex Montgomery faces 20-year term. He closed the notifications, opening instead photos of his latest project, a community center providing opportunities for underprivileged youth. The funding came from his legitimate success, not the schemes and frauds that had destroyed Sarah and Rex. Viper approached, carrying reports. Glitz's appeal was denied. She's facing 5 years. Gossip's extradition hearing is next week. And Giggles? Working double shifts at a diner in Ohio. Changed her name, but can't escape her past. Social media never forgets. Julian nodded, reviewing the documents. Each page represented another piece of justice served, another consequence delivered. His assistant arrived with more updates. Sir, the board approved the expansion. 3 new community projects, fully funded. Good. Julian signed the authorizations. Make sure the legal team reviews everything. We build on solid foundations here. The irony wasn't lost on him. His wife had built her life on appearances, Rex on manipulation. He had built on truth, hard, uncompromising truth, and survived their betrayal stronger than before. A letter had arrived from Sarah, sent from prison. He read it without expression. Julian, I understand now. what you are, what I did, the person I became. My cell gives me time to think, to remember the signs I ignored. You were never weak, never blind. You saw everything, waited, planned. I lost more than wealth and freedom. I lost myself, the person I pretended to be. Now I'm forced to face who I really am. Sarah. He placed the letter in a file marked closed, alongside reports of Rex's prison adjustment, poor, Glitz's failed appeals, Gossip's international legal troubles, and Giggle's desperate attempts to rebuild her life under a new identity. Cora's weekly update arrived. All legal proceedings concluded, all assets secured, all loose ends tied. His revenge wasn't just complete, it was absolute. The beach house that had once witnessed his humiliation now stood as a symbol of his triumph. The ocean that had reflected their mockery now mirrored his success. A hawk soared overhead, free and powerful. Julian watched it glide, remembering the man he'd been, the mask he'd worn, the patience he'd maintained. The serpent had shed its skin, revealing not weakness but deadly strength. His grandmother had wished for his happiness. He had found something better, truth, justice, and the power to enforce both. In the end, he had lost nothing that mattered and gained everything that did. His revenge hadn't consumed him. It had refined him, burned away pretense, left only pure purpose. The man who had walked away from that resort a year ago had been playing a role. The man who stood here now was authentic, powerful, uncompromising. The architect had built something greater than buildings. He had constructed justice itself, precise and inevitable. And in the wreckage of those who had wronged him, he found not satisfaction, but completion. The serpent had struck, the venom had worked, and now he was free. Not just to live, but to thrive. Not just to succeed, but to make a difference. The story that began with betrayal ended not with mere revenge, but with transformation. Julian Thorne, the man they had mistaken for weak, now stood revealed as what he had always been. A force of nature, patient but unstoppable, brutal but just. The serpent had taken flight. Epilogue. 10 years later. The Manhattan skyline stretched before Julian Thorne as he reviewed the latest proposals for his global sustainable architecture initiative. At 50, he'd maintained his imposing physique, a habit from his fighting days that served him well in the corporate arena. The scar above his left eyebrow remained, though his dark hair now carried distinguished streaks of silver. His office, occupying the top floor of the Thorne Innovation Center, reflected his evolution. Clean lines merged with sustainable materials, creating a space that balanced power with purpose. Awards lined one wall, not for social media influence or shallow achievements, but for revolutionary architectural designs and humanitarian contributions. Mr. Thorne, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Matthews is here with the quarterly reports. Cora Matthews entered, her own success evident in her confident stride. Their professional partnership had flourished over the decade, her legal brilliance complementing his strategic mind. The numbers exceed projections, she said, placing a tablet on his desk. The Community Development Program has transformed 12 urban areas this year alone. The Youth Education Initiative has a 97% success rate. Julian nodded, scanning the data. And our other matters? Cora pulled up another file. I thought you might be interested. Sarah's up for parole next month. Denied, I assume? Of course. Her behavior in prison has been problematic. 3 incidents of attempting to manipulate younger inmates into smuggling contraband. The parole board wasn't impressed. Julian's expression didn't change. A decade hadn't softened his stance on betrayal. Rex? Still serving his 20-year sentence. He tried starting an investment scheme within the prison. Got caught, added 5 more years to his term. Cora's lips curved. Old habits die hard. The others? Glitz was released last year after serving 5 years. She's working as a shopping mall security guard in New Jersey. No one will hire her for anything involving financial responsibility. Gossip? Still in hiding in South America. Interpol keeps tabs on her. She's working under an alias as a tour guide, telling stories to tourists instead of destroying lives with rumors. Cora checked her notes. Giggles, or Susan Mitchell as she's known now, is assistant manager at that diner in Ohio. Still single, still trying to rebuild her life, Julian stood, walking to the window. Below, construction crews worked on his latest project, a revolutionary green housing complex that would provide affordable homes while setting new standards for environmental responsibility. And Asha, still running her consulting business on the island. Her network has grown. She's become quite influential in regional development. She asks about you occasionally. Sent her the usual Christmas bonus. She was instrumental in that first phase. And Viper, Julian's expression softened slightly. Teaching at the youth center in Brooklyn. He's found his calling, showing troubled kids there's a better path than violence. A notification popped up on his desk screen. A news alert about Sarah. She'd written another appeal letter, claiming rehabilitation. Attached was a prison photo showing a woman aged beyond her years, the former beauty and confidence replaced by institutional drabness. She still writes to you, Cora observed. Monthly. Each letter goes directly to the file. Julian's voice held no emotion. She claims to understand now, to have changed. Do you believe her? Irrelevant. Understanding doesn't erase consequences. His phone buzzed, a message from the community center where he taught weekend classes in architecture and business ethics. A student had won a national design competition using principles Julian had taught him. Your revenge changed more than just their lives, Cora noted. It transformed you too. Not revenge, Julian corrected. Justice. Revenge is emotional, personal. What I did was restore balance. They chose deception, manipulation, cruelty. They faced the natural consequences of those choices. A young intern knocked and entered, carrying preliminary sketches for a new project. Julian recognized the look in the boy's eyes, determination mixed with raw talent, the same combination he'd seen in himself decades ago. Sir, I've revised the community center designs like you suggested. Julian spent the next hour reviewing the plans, teaching, guiding. This was his real legacy. Not the destruction of those who'd wronged him, but the construction of something meaningful in the aftermath. Later that evening, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Julian reviewed an old file. Photos of that day at the resort, when they'd thought they'd broken him. News clippings documenting their fall. Prison records tracking their descent. His phone buzzed with a message from Rex's prison account. I understand now what you are. What you always were. We thought the architect was your true face. We were blind. The fighter, the strategist, the avenger, that was always you. The architect was just a mask, wasn't it? The quiet man who looked away was a facade. We never stood a chance. Julian archived the message without replying. Rex's realizations came a decade too late to matter. A video call came in from the Maldives. Asha's weathered face appeared on screen. The serpent has built quite a nest, she observed, looking at his surroundings. Different from that day, you walked into my shop seeking allies. The foundation had to be destroyed before something better could be built. And those who betrayed you? Do their ghosts still haunt your dreams? They're not ghosts, Julian replied. Ghosts require emotional attachment. They're just cautionary tales now. After the call, Julian accessed the prison systems file on Sarah. Her latest psychiatric evaluation noted persistent difficulty accepting responsibility and continued attempts to manipulate through superficial charm. Some things never changed. He opened a hidden safe behind an award plaque, removing a worn leather journal. His grandmother's last words were written on the first page. Find happiness, Julian. Promise me. Below it, he'd written his response. I found truth instead. It served me better. A message from Viper appeared on his phone. Kid showing promise at the center. Raw talent, like you had. Want to help mentor him? Julian smiled slightly. This was how real change happened. Not through revenge or destruction, but through guidance and opportunity. His evening news alerts brought updates on the others whose lives had intersected with his revenge. Glitz had been fired from her security job for trying to scam elderly shoppers. Even a decade of consequences hadn't taught her honesty. Gossip's cover in Argentina had been blown. She tried selling fake travel packages to tourists. Old habits indeed died hard. Giggles had attempted to start a social media account, but her past had been quickly exposed. The internet never truly forgot. A letter arrived from Sarah's prison chaplain, seeking a character reference for her parole hearing. Julian marked it, returned to Cinder, without opening it. A decade of claimed reformation didn't erase her true nature. His last appointment of the day was with a young architect who'd risen through his mentorship program. The boy reminded Julian of himself at that age. Driven, focused, unwilling to accept limitations. "Sir," the young man asked, "why did you start this program? You could have just enjoyed your success." Julian touched the scar above his eyebrow. "Success without purpose is as hollow as revenge without justice. I learned that lesson thoroughly." Later that night, Julian stood on his penthouse balcony, watching the city lights. A decade had passed since he'd revealed his true nature to those who'd underestimated him. They remained caught in their own webs, serving time, hiding from consequences, struggling to rebuild shattered lives. He'd moved forward, building something meaningful from the ashes of their betrayal. His grandmother had wished for his happiness. He'd found something more valuable: purpose. His phone buzzed with a final message for the day, another student's success story from the community center. This was his real victory. Not the destruction of his enemies, but the construction of a lasting legacy. The hawk that had watched his humiliation at the resort might have symbolized his freedom then. But true freedom, he'd learned, came not from flying away, but from building higher. A decade later, the serpent hadn't just survived. It had transcended its own revenge. Justice had been served, cold and complete. But justice was just the beginning. What came after? The building, the teaching, the leading. That was the real triumph. Those who had betrayed him remained trapped in cells of steel or cells of their own making. He had built foundations instead of walls, created opportunities instead of destroying them. The architect had designed more than buildings. The fighter had won more than battles. The man they'd mistaken for weak had become a force for change. 10 years had proven that revenge was finite, but legacy was eternal. And Julian Thorne's legacy was just beginning. In his private study, he opened his grandmother's journal one last time. Below his decade-old response about finding truth, he added a final line. "Truth showed me justice. Justice taught me purpose. Purpose brought me peace." The serpent had done more than strike. It had risen, and that rise would continue, not through destruction, but through creation. Not through revenge, but through opportunity. Not through tearing down, but through building up. The next decade beckoned, full of possibilities. And Julian Thorne, the man they'd once mocked as powerless, stood ready to seize them all. Not for revenge. Not anymore. For something far more powerful: legacy. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.